many apologies for the terrible voiceover you are about to witness, as the host vocals were unfortunately corrupted during recording. Hello, and welcome to the Future Flavours of Sound Festival. Thank you for joining me here on the audio programming stream today. My name is Tom, and I'll be your host. I'm very excited to have with me today my two fantastic panelists. My first panelist is Dr. Owen Green from the University of Huddersfield, a composer and performer who is specialised in computer-based electronic music performance and a current researcher on the groundbreaking project FluCoMA. Dr. Owen, would you mind telling us a little bit about
that? Sure thing. My official job title is very long, absurdly long. It's Senior Research Fellow in Advanced Creative Coding. Which basically means that I'm there to act as a kind of interpreter between the technical aspects of the project and the musical aspects of the project. So one of the things we're trying to do is come up with a sort of viable synthesis of sort of artistic research and engineering research where rather than them just kind of drinking from each other, they somehow coalesce and make each other stronger and more productive. So my original background many years ago was in engineering, and I sort of stepped sideways into having an artistic practice from that. So that means I get to sort of participate all through the project, doing some technical work. Quite a lot of the C++ architecture is my fault, but also I sort of do creative research alongside that. Finding ways of bending and breaking algorithms.
Fantastic. Well, you could say you got your finger in all the pies there.
Yeah, that's generally the idea, yeah.
Well, it sounds very interesting.
It's a cushy job, man.
That's good to hear. Our second panelist today is Edwin Tomboza, an audio programmer and developer at the world-renowned audio plugin and software company. You most likely know them. I know I love them, and I use them on a daily basis. It's Native Instruments. Thanks for joining us today, Edwin.
So as you said, I'm Edwin. I'm a software engineer. I'm currently based in London. So I joined Native Instruments a year ago now. So I had the chance to work on the latest release of Guitar X6 as a software engineer, so doing mainly C++. Right now we're working on some new stuff that, I don't think I'm actually allowed to talk about any of this stuff. But new exciting stuff. I work a little bit with complete control as well, if you're familiar with. And so on a daily basis, it's, anything related to software, a Native Instruments, C++, even a bit of higher level language. So that's for me.
That's fantastic. It must be incredibly rewarding and varied work, and very interesting to work for such a huge company that's a spearhead in the industry.
Yeah, definitely.
So with that, we will move on to our first submission. This was submitted by Ben Cantil, and it's titled Eden Mosaics. It's an experimental electronic dance music concept album based on the Genesis creative narrative, brought to creation through the collision of Python, Max MSP, and Ableton Live. Let's get into it.
Hi, my name is Ben Cantil, and all of the interesting organic sound design that you're hearing in there was made with concatenative sound synthesis. Let me solo all of it. Now, in the mix there, you'll hear water sounds, and there's even little segments of little voices in there. Yeah, you can kind of hear a voice breaking through. And it's mixed up with all sorts of sounds, mostly organic sounds from the earth, water, wind. We've got all the elements represented there. And all of these sounds are coming together using a variety of different algorithms under the broad umbrella of concatenative sound synthesis. What sounds I use in this project and when I use them are dictated by this storyline right here, which is based on the Genesis creation narrative. So when the world is created, we'll start off with the sounds of an empty world and then work up to vegetation and animals and then eventually to humans and then sounds that represent consciousness, like sounds that are made by human beings and civilization and instruments and stuff like that. And you can see that these sounds will come together to tell the classic creation story. And these are all the major plot points as the corpus opens up. This project is partially a meditation on the thinking that goes into curating a corpus. This is a curated corpus that gets bigger with time for the expressed purpose of telling a story. One creative technique I'm doing a lot on this album is sound replacement. So here's a little drum loop I wrote that won't even make it into the final version of this track. I'm just using it to create other loops. Let's take a little loop and concatenate it. This is Audio Guide, a really cool program created in Python by Ben Hackbarth. So in this script, I'm saying, look at the loop that I just made, and then look at this folder full of sounds that I associate with this moment in the story, and recreate this loop by first looking at where all the zero crossings are, and then looking at how long each segment is, and then finding the closest matching spectral footprint in the corpus that matches that particular moment in the loop by its spectrum and by its power, like how loud it is. Okay, with all of those descriptors in there, it is supposedly going to give me a loop that vaguely sounds like the original when we run this script. So just a reminder, this is the original again. And here's the Audio Guide concatenated version. Do you hear the bird song in there? The other kind of concatenative sound synthesis method that I'm using for this record is called NMF based. For this example, let's use some water sounds with a little bit of whispering mixed in with it. And we're going to recreate that same target using a max patch I made with the FluCoMA externals. Here's the original one more time. And here's the recreated loop. I like to get a little more mileage out of my concatenative sound designs by running them through the refractalizer, which is a granular spectral time stretcher I made in MaxMSP. And I've recently built in a pulsar ratio sequencer in here, which does just intonation in tonal frequency ranges and rhythmic subdivisions in rhythmic ranges. Now I'm going to send you out with some more audio excerpts. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you've enjoyed.
Okay, welcome back. We have with us now Ben Cantil, the fantastic mind behind Eden Mosaics. I know you were very thorough in your video with your explanation, but is there anything else you would like to add or discuss about your project?
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And hey, it's great to see you again, Dr. Owen Green and Edwin Tomboza. Welcome. Thank you so much for being on this panel. I think that video wraps up the project pretty well, and I was just hoping to kind of hear your initial reaction to the project and points that you think I should probably dissect and discuss that you'd be interested in hearing about more, since this whole field of concatenative synthesis is fairly fresh, and I'm hoping to bring something to the table.
In which case, I'll open up the floor to our panelists now. Take it away, guys.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi Ben.
Hey.
How you doing? It's really interesting to see your work in a larger context, because I know we discussed obviously the FluCoMA specifics when we first met. I guess I'm going to end up asking everyone a variation on this question, but it'd be interesting to find out a little bit more about what you envisage for the sort of framework that's coming out of this. You've got this kind of ecosystem of tools that you've been investigating. Is that going to have a sort of life for your artistic practice beyond this project? Are you building up a base of tools that you're hoping are going to stay with you for a while, or is it all very focused on this particular album?
Good question. I hope to, through this project, expand my vocabulary. And it's all really, to me, this stuff is really hard. And so I think the point of this project, or one of the purposes, is kind of forcing myself to just work with these tools for a little while to get my hands kind of really dirty in them with creatively. And then I hope that they just remain in my tool set later on as part of the larger ecosystem of sound design tools that I use. But I have been able to get some really cool novel sounds out of this stuff, and I think that in being able to produce sounds that aren't commonly heard in a lot of other places is definitely something I'm interested in doing in the long term.
Yeah, okay, I can probably go. Hey, Ben. Yeah, maybe just to give you a little bit of feedback first, because I've got some questions as well. But
sure.
Yeah, first of all, I thought that your the approach to the project was actually really, really nice. Like it's really an artistic approach to kind of present some scientific topic, I thought, which is something I haven't really been exposed to much. So I really like it. Just the whole idea of having like an album to just present the whole concept. So I like this really well. The only thing I wanted to know, maybe if you can talk a bit more about this, is would you be able to just give just a little bit more description on what exactly is the concatenative synthesis? And because the first time I actually saw it, I just directly thought about like this kind of interpolation stuff or timbre transfer, thing like this. So I don't know if it's related to this kind of thing, or is it? Yeah, can you give a little bit of word on this?
Concatenative synthesis is a pretty broad collection of different algorithms, and the idea is that you are you're using a large or an arbitrary sized database of sounds to that you call a source, to match either descriptors or some kind of interaction, or to match a target sound. And that way I can have a breakbeat, and then I can say, all right, recreate that breakbeat with the sounds of waves or the sounds of bricks or something like that. And what comes out the other end will be a vague imitation of that breakbeat, which uses either these timbres or these direct sounds. Of course, sound imitation is just one kind of concatenative synthesis. Another way to do it is like you have programs like Cat Art, which allows you to visualize sounds in a two-dimensional K-field, and you can kind of interact with them in interesting ways. So it's a pretty broad umbrella, and the whole idea is to just using data science kind of intersecting with sound design to have a way to access a whole bunch of different sound segments in some kind of organized way. Would you say that that's a good description, Owen? Because he's the king of this, actually.
Yeah, and that's a good general description. I mean, it's, in your case, you've got this stuff it's data driven. You're using these descriptors, and the point is to to assemble new sounds from fragments of a database. I guess a follow-on question I'd have for the specific work you've done is how much experimentation you've had to do to find descriptors that work, given you've got these quite varied sounds. You're trying to match environmental recordings with drum recordings. Has that been tricky to find descriptors that actually capture what you're trying to find?
Yes, actually, a lot of this project has been coming up with presets. I have one audio guide script that's just good for recreating what I consider hi-hats. Like like that kind of sound. I have one that's really good at creating long textures. And I have one that doesn't care about anything except 0 offsets, you know. And a part of turning in the material for this research, I hope, is to turn in a whole bunch, all of my audio guide presets and all of the script presets I've also made for the NMF based. So if anyone feels like, hey, I should try to, you know, I want to be able to do polyphony, you know, I want to be able to recreate a melody or something, then they'll have a little library of starting points.
I was also wondering, actually, just because most of the project is focused on the curation as well of the the sound. So I was actually wondering, is there any specific technique you're using for, like, is there like some field recording, or you just get some data from some sources on the internet and things like this? I was wondering.
Yes, that's a good question. It's a combination of different sources. I got permission earlier in the year to use a massive sample library that students have been creating at the University of Edinburgh over the years, and there's some great stuff in there. I also use Free Sound, which is a huge internet archive, and I also use sounds that either I've recorded or that I've purchased from sample libraries, because there's some sounds out there that you just need that you don't mind paying for, like really interesting instrument sounds. One sound I really wanted to run through the concatenative NMF-based algorithm is the sound of a snake charmer's whistle. And that was actually a really hard sound to find. I had to find a Punji sample set and have it be big and diverse enough that it could play any melody that I wanted it to. So yeah, curating this set has kind of been, just a daily thing. I wake up every day and I think about, what about big crowds? Let's go search for crowd sounds. So I've in this collection, the possible sounds that you'll hear on this album go into the tens of thousands of different sounds.
Yeah, I've got a production question actually.
Sure.
I mean, the finished pieces that we hear at the beginning and end of the video sound sort of really lush and sort of good density, lots of nice sort of transient activity in there. Presumably you're having to do a fair bit of layering, because what comes out of concatenative synthesis tends to lose a little bit of that definition. I mean, you can hear in the demo of the patch using our stuff that obviously the transients get smeared because we're having to do phase resynthesis and all that sort of thing. What sort of techniques have you developed to sort of get some of that crispiness back?
Yes, well, the NMF stuff absolutely has problems with transients, but Audio Guide does a pretty good job at preserving transients. Though I'd say the Audio Guide, the one thing that I've had trouble with is getting my output to be perfectly quantized. So a lot of the time I'll make like a bunch of gibberish with Audio Guide that's almost what I want it to be, and then I'll edit it a little bit to conform it into place. The sounds on the album that are not generated by concatenative synthesis are also really clearly defined in the brief. I allow myself a kick drum, and I'm using the same synthesizer through the whole album. I'm using an OB6, and I'm trying not to make that the main focus of the album, but kind of the main accompaniment, the one accompaniment instrument. So between the kick drum transients and the OB6, that covers a lot of the stuff that the other things, it helps out the compositions a bit. But for transient sort of material with I got to be using something that doesn't do the spectral resynthesis. I got to be doing like the Audio Guide or something Mubu, or recently I got Rhythm Cat as well, which has been really helpful.
I'm actually wondering which one actually kind of powered the project. Is it because you had the concatenative synthesis thing and then you just wanted to find like a story then through an album, or was it the opposite, like you had the album in mind with the actual story that you wanted to show, and then you just thought about this kind of synthesis technique to just highlight this? Or
that's a great question. Well, first I got bit with the concatenative synthesis bug about a year ago, And it was, what really inspired me was this album by the artist Rob Clouth called 0 Point, where he did the NMF-based concatenative synthesis, and the sound design he made on that album just really, really impressed me, and it made me want to reinvest into my, education. Meanwhile, my partner, Katherine Stewart, is a writer, and she's actually working on an adult fiction novel, which is a series of short stories, and each short story is a retelling of the Eden narrative. So in the last year, I've had the unique opportunity to kind of listen to her thought process as she creates these characters and kind of explores archetypal relationships in her writing. And I thought it'd be really fun to kind of, I feel like she kind of jump-started my interest there. I just think that's really fascinating. How do you embody the first masculine and feminine, and how do you embody that first jealousy and in paradise and stuff like that? These ideas were just kind of creatively inspiring to me. So a part of why I chose this story was kind of vibing off the energy that's in the household right now with Katherine writing her story, and I'm making like kind of a chapter in the book in music.
So, just a quick question. Are there any areas you're looking to improve on this? Where would you like to take this in the future?
Thank you. That's a great question. I feel right now that the music is really coming along. The tracks are coming quickly. A lot has been done even since I made that video. And the next part that I'm really starting to worry about is that this is a pretty large concept. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and I'm about 4,500 words into my report that needs to be 15,000 words. And right now, I am documenting like recipes. Like, if you want to have this outcome, if you want to have the outcome of a polyphonic chord progression, this is what makes good corpus for that. This is what you want to set your settings to. Those kinds of results. And this is how I failed too. I'm also documenting this was the hardest thing to do. I could not do it, surprisingly, And so right now my chapters are I kind of pick it up pretty immediately after I run into these issues and try to write about it and document it. And that flow is coming around all right, but as researchers and thinkers yourselves, I wanted to ask advice for how would you like to see this story structured? I was thinking that one style I could do this at is just do track by track. Say, this track, break it down. This is how it was made. Explode each track. Or it could be more of a recipe book where, hey, if you want to learn about how I did the drums, refer to these songs. And here's where I compromised with those kinds of drum sounds. Here's where I reused those ones to make these other ones. I could do the topics like that, or I could do a combination of both. I'm a little like, I feel like the information's coming out, but the overall picture is a little bit disorganized in my mind. So any advice you wanted to share with how you'd like to see this story end?
I certainly have opinions.
I'd love to hear it.
I think okay, you've got two things that you're trying to do, I think. You need to untangle them. The first is you're doing a piece of academic writing to summarise this project, it sounds like, and that's where the word limit comes in. The second is that you've got all these great discoveries that you've made along the way, which are possibly more widely shareable. So I think you possibly need to think about targeting two different audiences there. For the purposes of writing a report that's going to get assessed as part of this project, then it's up to you to decide what you want the lead frame to be. If the music is the point, then lead with the music, because that's the story that you're telling the reader, and take them through it that way. But I think as part of a longer documentation trail for this kind of work, having this recipe-based sort of archive of discoveries you've made about concatenative synthesis could form both an appendix to the report, so that whoever's reading it has something to refer to see the discoveries that you've made along the way, but also would be a really valuable sort of online resource for people trying to do this sort of work in the future. So I think academically I'd focus on the music if that's where the centre of the project is, but include this other stuff as an appendix, which therefore gets out of the word count. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It also makes me a little scared because that means that a lot of the writing I've done won't be included in the word count.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's only a few weeks to go as well, so I don't want to throw everything away.
I know.
I mean, it could be another tactic could be just to split the thing into two parts. So you have a quick run through the album, and set the scene that way, and then you have perhaps a condensed run through. But I think you've probably made so many little discoveries along the way that you could fill 15,000 words just with that, and not get to talk about the art side of it at all. But it's probably quite important to talk about the art side of it because that's the thing that drives all the decisions ultimately.
Yeah, my partner Katherine suggested that I structure it like one really long chapter about the technical and one big one about the creative. But I'm having trouble resolving that because a lot of the time my technical decisions are creative decisions, and they kind of feel a little entangled to separate completely. But yeah, it sounds a little close to what you're saying, though, is kind of separate it into these two sections where you're really just talking about the music and the songs and the creative process. Another one is talking kind of about the trials and tribulations of getting it to work.
Well, yeah, I mean, the split's always going to be artificial. It's just one of those things that there isn't really a true clean line between doing technical work and doing artistic work in this case. So that's why I called it framing rather than anything else. It's a question of what you want to foreground, and then the stuff that isn't going to fit in the word limit but nonetheless is important is what appendices are quite useful for. And don't forget, you don't have to stop on August the 20th or whenever it is. This can be an ongoing mission where Ben enriches the world with all the accumulated wisdom of stuff to do with sort of data-driven concatenative synthesis.
Thank you. That's good advice.
No, nothing more, I think, for me to say on this, because, yeah, that's not really my domain. But there was just one thing I was thinking, actually, just not really in terms of academic, but in terms of, like, just the actual artistic aspect of it. Because you were talking about, having separate track to showcase the different, different findings you had. But I was actually thinking that would be nice if then you just want to expose the album or something like this. That I was seeing actually the whole album as just a track, like literally one single track, super long, because the topic is so much about the temporal aspect of it. Like I was just thinking that for me that would be just one track running from the beginning to the end. Yeah, but as I said, it's not taking the academic aspect in consideration. So yeah, take this with a grain of salt. Yeah.
That is kind of how I want it to feel. I've always loved concept albums, I love, I've always wanted to do one myself, and this felt like a concept where it's not just a story, it's thematic. It's like, it also really helps me as a composer. Like at any point in time, I know that I'm limited to a certain set of sounds that I can use in this part of the story, and that's really helped me, like, break inspiration blocks, because I'm like, all right, I gotta fit in this box. We get to this point, and here we go. So it's been a lot of fun to write, and yeah, I'm trying to make it feel like a cohesive single piece of composition.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. It's been a pleasure. Now it's time for me to introduce our next guest. The next guest is Joseph Creswell. He's been working on the MIDI Tapper, and that's an app to quickly capture musical ideas on the go by recording rhythmic and simple melodic ideas on your phone and exporting them as MIDI. This was created using Juice. Now let's have a look.
And I'm making a music app that I've wanted for a while. When it comes to music apps, I find many of them try to do too much. They try and replace the tools I've already got on my computer, when all I want is something to quickly capture my ideas. I found that musical inspiration can strike at any point. In the past, I found myself tapping a rhythm all the way home on a bus until I can get home and record the idea. Or I've made myself a badly performed voice recording like this, and then I have to figure out what I actually meant by those noises when I'm trying to input it into my computer the next day. And that's why I'm making this MIDI tapper app. The idea is simple. Record rhythmic and simple melodic ideas, which you can export directly to your music software to use immediately. Right, so here's a recording of the bare bones version of the app, and I'll walk you through what it does. First, you have the buttons to play your idea. And while you can set the recording tempo numerically, a key feature of this app is that tap tempo is built into the recording process. All you do is you set your tap tempo counting, and this will be the amount of beats before it starts recording that you need to tap. The more beats, the more precise it will be. To record, you click the record button. You can then tap your tempo on either of the buttons, and then you're straight into recording. Once you've recorded, you can play back your recording. And if you like it, you can save it and even export it immediately. From here, you can view your saved recordings and play back any of them by just tapping on them. You also have the option to delete and export any of your recordings. Exporting is as simple as clicking export and using the Android sharing system to pick where you want to send it to. I like to send my recordings to Dropbox. Moving to the computer, we've got a Logic project with a simple drum beat in. From here we can drag in our MIDI file from Dropbox. And we can even use the tempo information that we recorded at, because that's all saved within the MIDI file. So playing it back, it will be just as we recorded it. Nice, so now we can move our MIDI file to the desired instrument and move the MIDI information to the correct notes. In this case, a kick and a snare. And now we have our fill that we can play back. I noticed I rushed it at the end of the fill, and so that can be fixed with some simple quantization. The app's not about getting a perfect recording, it's just about getting your ideas in a usable state which you can edit later. I'm pretty happy with the app how it was in that recording, but since then I've been working on removing that extra step in your audio software where you have to move around the MIDI notes to where you actually wanted them, and then also giving the user more interesting sounds than just sine tones to play with. So here's the demo sampler I've been working with. This is a rough mock-up of what the edit page will look like on the app. It basically allows the user to quickly customize the layout and sounds that they use. So quickly going through this, we've got the top slider which allows the user to change the amount of buttons that are on screen. It fills in from the bottom. I chose that layout because music tools often have the kick drum in the bottom left, and I didn't want it to keep moving around when the user wanted to change their layout slightly. Below the slider we've got the kit selection where you can choose between 3 kits. I also plan to add a synth toggle so that you can play melodic ideas as well. Below the playable buttons we have the user customization area. It allows the user to customize the sound on each playable button. Clicking save allows you to save the preset so that you can recall it later. And then delete deletes the preset. Below this we have the preset selection, where you can select from essential user presets like 6 cowbells, or you can select some of the default presets like a full kit. Right, that's it for now. I plan to release this on app stores by the end of summer. I just need to integrate the edit page fully and update some of the UI design. I'll put some of my contact details on screen if you want to ask me any questions or get in touch. Cheers.
And welcome back. We are now joined by Joseph Creswell, the man behind the MIDI Tapper. Is there anything else you would like to add, Joe?
I think pretty happy with what the video says, but I guess one thing I've had, I made this app, which is to get music ideas anywhere, and then I've been, stuck inside for a year, so I've not really made use of it yet. so I can't say how useful it is for me yet, other than like times when I've not been bothered to get out of bed and I've not had an idea. But yeah, I'm excited to actually get it finished and released.
I imagine once things have opened up a bit more, it'll be quite exciting to test it out live, out in the world. So we'll pass over to our panelists now. Let's start with Owen again.
Cheers, Thomas. So I think one of the big things you drew attention to in the video and in the PDF is that you were struggling a bit with GUI stuff, and sort of how to get the user interface to feel like what you wanted it to feel like. Has that moved forward at all, or are you still feeling a bit stuck with that?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing I struggle with a bit, I guess, with the UX design. It's something that's just like major trial and error for me, I guess. So that's what I've just decided to do, is just, I was working, as you saw that app at the end, I was working on like a computer UI, and I've decided to just move across to only working on mobile and just like keep trialing and error, different ideas. And that's, I guess, my working mode for that now. And
are you using the Juice GUI stuff to do that for you?
Yeah.
I mean, I think my very limited understanding is that the price of using the Juice stuff is because it's so cross-platform. It's hard to get a truly native feel. What other sort of programs have you looked at to try and draw inspiration from UX-wise? Because I mean, one of the things about making these things feel sensible, I think, particularly on Android, is that there's conventions there that are very different to desktop applications. So you don't tend to see so many menus or dialogues, for example. Have there been things that have inspired you?
Yeah, there's been quite a few. I've been looking like across domains as well. So in terms of music apps, there's like a Koala sampler, I think it's called, which is just a sampler where you quickly tap and you record as you tap, which is just like, I think, really smart UX design. It's reducing the number of button presses. But then in terms of like single page UIs, because I wanted to reduce the number of pages, I guess there's a problem I have with some music apps is they just too fiddly and too many pages. And so I've taken, I guess, inspiration from some music apps by just saying, "Oh, I don't want to, I don't want this." But other apps I've looked at is actually like home automation apps, because they use a lot of dials and menus and stuff, and they try and fit it into like the smallest user design package possible. And so I've actually been like taking some of my like menu logic that I've been trying to make just straight from those, to see if that will help make a decent UX.
Cool. Hey, Joe. So first of all, I thought the actual idea for the project was really nice. I mean, just personally on I already felt the same problem as you just said, like having an idea and just wanting to type it quickly. So personally, I think it's a really great idea. But I think there's a lot of user features that would be nice as well for just more than just me. So really +1 for this. I think I had the same kind of comment as Owen, actually, in terms of the in the UX, because I think in terms of what you have, this is really nice because you're just focusing on the simplicity of the app and its effectiveness. So I think that's really what you need for an app like this. So that's perfect. But yeah, I have to admit, maybe there was just some work that you need to do on the as you said, just the UX, to make it so the look and feel just feels good, and the user interaction are quite nice. So I was thinking the same, like if it was about using the Juice GUI, maybe you could just have a look at how you could just implement something for maybe going really native with just like the Android or iOS. So yeah, that was one of the thing. And there's maybe another thing where I wanted to ask you the question, actually, because there was this feature with the with the quantizing, and I thought actually that I understand your point saying that because the app is not about getting the ideas right. You just wanted to exclude these features for now. But I was actually thinking a bit the opposite way, like that would be actually a nice feature for someone who just, want to record something quickly, but not necessarily as is a drummer or is not even used to use this kind of devices. Maybe that would be a nice thing to have. So I was thinking maybe, if possible, even having like a toggle just to give the option to users, that would be actually nice. So what was I wanted to ask actually is it something you think would be hard to implement on with what you have currently, or I just wanted to have your opinion on this.
Yeah, that's interesting. In terms of like editing MIDI, I think if I implemented it, it would be like rather simple, just like quantize to the nearest 16th note or 8th note, and give that choice rather than moving individual MIDI notes, because I've seen that be quite fiddly in other apps. I think that's my main problem with editing MIDI on the phone, rather than like, I don't want that feature at all. But yeah, that's interesting. I might I'll add that to the list and see how it adds to it, because I can see how it can be helpful there.
What would version 2 of this look like if you were going to expand it in any direction? Because there's so many possibilities for different ways you could take it. Where would you see it going once you've got a sort of 1 million downloads and what have you?
Yeah. So version 2, definitely more sound packs, I guess, more sound choices to choose from, and maybe like an audio export as well might be helpful for like people who don't want to mess around with MIDI, are happy with the sound that it gives you. I like a sort of an app that's like in a small package. You can open it, record the idea, and close it. It's not like something that you live on. So maybe an extension to this, or like the next step, would be actually making a MIDI edit app, and so you could export directly from this app to a different app if you wanted to. And so it would be a separate thing, but hopefully that separate thing would also be quite easy to pick up and use quickly. I don't know if you have any thoughts of where this could go.
But maybe, sorry.
Go.
No, maybe just as a follow-up to this, actually, because it's kind of related to what I wanted to ask. But there was not really indication, actually, if you had this working on either Android or iOS. Because, I remember that you mentioned Android, the sharing system, I think. But then you mentioned the App Store as well, which I think is iOS. So is it something you already have on like both platforms, thanks to Juice, and you tested both and it works nice? Or do you tend to just even go, as I said, really just focusing on one or the other, or just
Yeah, that's what's been so nice about using Juice, is I've managed to test it on both quite quickly. So it does work on both. I think I remember Matt saying back when I was at uni that it's actually hard to get Juice apps onto the App Store because of some weird legality. So I guess I'll run into that when I come up to it.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, there's the licensing terms, isn't there? Because I think Juice is GPL until you give them some money. But presumably that's easy enough to work around by giving them some money. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, so you were asking at the end of your response to my question, sort of where I might see sort of possible extensions. I mean, one much more difficult thing to implement would be to have audio input rather than tapping input, and try and have something that would desegregate the audio into streams, which is doable. I mean, I think there's libraries out there that you could lean on to help you. In fact, some of the stuff that Ben was just telling us about, sort of very basic unmixing things. So if you could make some basic beatboxing noises with your mouth, and then it could try and you've probably used the thing in Live where it attempts to make a drum pattern out of some audio, and it works hilariously badly most of the time. I think it's possible to do a better job with that if you introduce some additional constraints. So certainly I think there'd be a class of user for whom using their voice would be more natural, perhaps than tapping. But I don't know how big that population would be, and whether there'd be enough interest to justify the development time that it would take. Sort of going around the side of that, I mean, I did a very little bit of looking into what other things were like that out there for Android at the moment. I was surprised that there weren't more, to be honest. There was a thing that seems to have disappeared 10 years ago called Music Memo, which was very guitar based, and it was about capturing melodic ideas perhaps more than rhythmic ideas. And there's something that Apple make called Song Memo. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's much more about recording audio and having a kind of prototypical sequencer. Did you find that there was much of a sort of ecosystem of these sorts of programs out there, or is it an untapped niche?
There are a few, but I'm not quite happy with, I guess, the implementation of it. For half of my master's project, I guess, was looking at existing apps because I wanted to see what I was working with or what existed. And so there are a few where you can record just MIDI and that's quite finicky, I guess. So it's not completely untapped, but I'd say it's not a market that's paid attention to much recently. Yeah.
Did you?
But I do like the idea of audio to MIDI. No, sorry. Go on.
The audio to MIDI sounds pretty cool. Actually, that would be a really nice feature. And still on the subject of like things you could do for the future. But I think you mentioned already in your presentation, in your reports. But do you already have the synthesizer version, like just not the drums, but the actual like just any like having a keyboard or something like this, just to record as well notes?
I've got a very basic version of this. It's one of the UX parts I'm struggling with quite a bit now, because it's hard to, you want someone to be able to select the notes they want to use, I guess. So I've got like a scale selection. You select a scale and then you select your root note and then you work from there, and then you can choose between presets which are kind of close and you can move around the root note. And that kind of works, but it just seems like I've got like 5 different menus for choosing this stuff. And it seems still kind of finicky. So that's something that I'm still trying to work my head around, how that could work. Because I don't want, like, I think 9 is sort of, 9 or 12 is probably like the maximum number of buttons I could really have on my phone screen that is decently usable. So, yeah, it's hard to give people the melodic choice with that.
Well, it's looking great so far, and thank you very much for sharing that with us, Joe. Now we will be moving on to our next participant, Robert Fullum, and he's been working on an interactive music creation program. This is a Twitch interactive match pack that is also a self-contained music creation suite containing a drum machine, FM synth, subtracted synth, and effects. This was brought to creation through the use of MaxMSP, Twitch, OBS, web browsers, and Node. Let's take a look.
We got a drum machine, 2 synths, sequencer, and effects. This is the heart of the Twitch command control. It's got a script that connects Max to the Twitch chat. This is where the script takes the chat and formats it as command and arguments and sends it to Max. This subpatch takes the incoming commands from Twitch, converts them to Max messages and values, and then sends them to their devices. And here's a cheat sheet of all the commands.
Okay, welcome back. Now we're joined by Robert Fullum. Welcome to the stream, Robert. First of all, is there anything else you'd like to say about the project?
A million things, but it's pretty much, it is what it is, the way it is, I guess, for now.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about the goals and aims of this project?
So I guess the goal was twofold. One, it was just kind of have, like, if there's enough people on the stream typing away, you're going to have things, everything's always going to be changing all the time. And it's kind of also like a sneaky way to trick people into doing some audio programming without realizing that's what they're doing. So, but yeah, and I just thought it would be a fun way to like actually interact with other people while I was sitting around at home all locked down.
In that case, let's open up the floor again to our panelists. How about we start with Edwin this time?
Oh, yeah. Hey, Robert. Okay, so first of all, yeah, I think that was really nice projects. I mean, I really have I think it's for the current time that we're really living at the moment. I think it's just perfect, as you just said it, like being in lockdown and wanting to have some collaboration with people. So I think that's totally the right application. But I think even before this, just I think the success of like streaming service and like Twitch or something like this, I think it makes it really that makes sense that to have an app like this. So I really appreciate this. I like the fact that you try to take care of the user as well. Make sure that they just arrive and they can just start to tweak some stuff without having too much knowledge in like DSP or whatever. Like, if you have like extended command that would just be go and run forever, that would be really hard. So I think this is really a nice touch. The first thing I want to say, just for a bit of feedback, and maybe I want to ask you on this actually, is I thought your Max MSP view, the one that you actually streamed in the in the streaming, I just thought the view was a bit dense. Like there was just a lot of stuff there going on, which I can understand. Like there's actually a lot to play with at the same time. So it's not only just like there's too much. It's like there's a lot of things to play with. But yeah, I think I would have liked it if it was a bit more just kind of organized in another way, maybe just like the same size. And I even wanted to ask you actually, because I noticed that you still have some. It seems like you even have some parameters that you could control with the knob, which seems like it's something that you would be using, but not like the user. So
yeah, there are a few things I call like God mode, where like I can control the BPM, and there's a few things where I can go in and just change myself that there aren't like commands that you could type in. So, and also like anything is mouse enabled because it's Max.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I was confused at the beginning, because I thought actually maybe you could just literally display just like the value of the parameters, and so the user can do whatever he wants. But actually, maybe you want to have control too. So yeah, actually makes sense. So okay, one of the questions I wanted to ask is because I've seen that you mentioned that you tested this with you and another person, I think. Yeah, which is maybe the thing I wanted to know is like, are you already thinking about some strategy to handle the fact that there would be like a lot of people just with like you would have tons of queries? Like, do you have some blocking effects while they're processing buffers or things like this that you can maybe?
I haven't had a chance to use it with a lot of people because I don't have anybody, like when I stream, nobody's there. So I would love to see what happens when it starts getting lots of messages. I have no idea what would happen.
Cool.
I mean, as far as I know, it's just going to start like, as the command comes in, it's just going to change. So I don't know how much a lot of commands coming in at the same time would happen, because it would just be sequential.
Yeah, that's even what I was thinking, that maybe, well, this is for later for you anyway, but yeah, maybe you will have some strategy where you were saying like, either you just like do some debouncing or things like this, because when there was too many queries, you just don't handle all of them, or even you saying like, if there's, that'll be maybe too hard, but saying like, if one instrument is currently being processed, you just like need to wait before accessing or something like this. But yeah, but other than that, I think the as I said, the overall idea is like, yeah, really nice. So
cool. Thanks. Yeah. And what you said about the screen is like, that's been a problem with like just trying to get everything to fit on the screen. I like make them smaller, make the thing smaller, but then if it's too small to see. And I actually had another instrument on there that I got rid of just because there was no space for it. And then on top of that, like a previous version, I also had like a little cheat sheet of the commands, but they were all wedged in, and now I have the commands on a spreadsheet, which is its own problem, because who's going to go to a spreadsheet when they're trying to watch a stream? But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my immediate comments would have been echoing Edwin's about what was on the screen. I mean, maybe another way of thinking about it is that for these purposes, you don't need quite such a literal representation on the screen as you'd have if it were a manually controlled instrument. So I don't know if you've looked at the Ableton Learning Synths website at all.
Probably not in a while.
Right. I mean, one of the great things about that is that they just get rid of all the traditional sort of GUI elements that we're used to for filters and stuff, because and concentrate on much simpler representations. And it could be that actually, because you're not offering people tactile control over these things, you could get away with and perhaps even find more musical value in something that was much more schematic and therefore more evocative for the people who play. My first question, which I guess is a bit related, partially answered, is sort of who you were seeing this for. And I think you partially answered it because you were talking about sort of somehow attracting people to Twitch. But so you're imagining this as sort of a group of strangers that are going to organically come together to make music, or as a kind of spontaneous band sort of thing.
Yeah, the idea like would be like if there were people who knew me and followed my stream and knew I was doing it would partake, but anybody who stumbled upon it could see, anybody could type into the chat and it'll take the command. And I do have the chat bot will like post a link to the spreadsheet, which just has like a little quick tutorial on one page, a cheat sheet, and then the full explanation. So the idea is like anybody could show up and just start like typing commands and getting their hands onto the music and changing it as we go.
And have you looked at sort of, I guess, related things like tidal cycles and sort of other rhythmic-based live coding languages as a possible source of inspiration for sort of how to summarize the language and things like that?
I have not. That'd be a good idea. It's just kind of something I started doing one day, and next thing I knew, it was the big thing that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think tidal cycles would be interesting because there's a lot of overlap in inspiration insofar as, I don't know if you've looked at it at all, but Alex MacLachlan sort of came up with this very specialised language for doing patterns, primarily aimed at music. So the architecture is actually quite similar. You have this textual language which is deliberately simple and deliberately quite terse. And rather than Max, it actually talks to Super Collider, but it's a similar kind of thing. So both, I guess, from seeing ways of extending the language, but also of perhaps how to document it and attract people into a community of users. I mean, I especially like the idea of this, that it's collaborative by design. That's good. And I guess from a musical point of view, as much as a computational point of view, thinking about what happens if your co-players disagree with each other. They start having an argument about where to set the filter, how you can sort of handle that and represent that.
I envision things like that as like if someone puts in a command and they put the filter down here, the next person's like no, and the filter goes up here, but you're already typing something else, or it'll just keep on going back and forth, and that's just how the song goes now. Like their disagreement's part of what it is.
You already have some plan for like we already said that there was already a lot of stuff, but like I'm curious about first of all your choice of instrument and effect. Like, is it something that you had already somewhere because you programmed it in a Max MSP, or where did that come from actually?
The instrument choices?
Yeah, the instrument choices and the effect. Like, is it you implement everything in Max MSP or?
So I think if I remember when I first started making it, I think I just started with a drum machine and some random samples that I had put together, and then get it working, and then make another one. I had another synth that I didn't like, but I just put it together to get it working, and then as things go, I just I didn't like the drum samples. I made better drum samples. I pulled in the FM synth because I had one of those working already from something else, and I tried to translate it to this, and then so it's just kind of like whatever comes up in my head, and that's kind of something too, that it could be like these are the instrumentation for one version, but another version can have completely different instruments, and all you really have to do is change the command structure, which is a bit tedious but relatively easy. It's time consuming because I have to click on every single Max object and change the command word, but the gist of it's all still there, the structure's all still there. So the idea is whatever instrument idea I have, I could easily just take it out and put another one in.
I think you said in your blurb that you were looking for ways to make it easier to add and remove instruments. Is that partly to do with this command structure stuff, or does it look like in the video everything's embedded in one huge patch, and you're getting that Max MSP problem of having one huge patch that you have to keep in your head?
It's kind of, so I did actually swap out one synth, and that's kind of why I realized it was such a pain, is because so it was easy in the fact that you can copy and paste a lot of the things over, but then you can't just Control F and replace all the instances of it. You have to double click on a thing, write the thing you want, go down, and so it's easy to switch, but it's really, really tedious and time consuming just because of its Max. And that one patch that controls all the routing of the commands, I could feasibly break that out into one of those for each, but it just worked really nicely to have it all there, so I could just copy paste, move things around, and say, oh, I know this is going to be I know the reverb commands are going to be the same. I'm just going to change, instead of drum verb, it's going to say synth reverb.
If you ever come to refactoring this, there are ways of making it less painful. And I think if you break stuff out into B patches, then you can automatically load and unload submodules. But things like the command structuring stuff, you can start using objects like col or dict to actually get programmatic control over all this stuff, which ultimately means that you just have to edit JSON files. You don't have to go in and change sort of 83 vaguely connected things in a patch, which is always a bit tedious to do. So if you can get to a central place where you're just editing text files to change the syntax, you'll probably find it less of a drag, but it will probably mean ripping quite a lot of it apart and rebuilding again.
No, that makes sense. Actually, I used a very similar, I made another patch that was this kind of algorithmic NFT composer for this other project, and I wound up having to do a bunch of, I think it was JSON file creation and editing for that, which could be repurposed back into this now, so that makes sense, yeah.
What an amazing patch. perhaps in the future this can help redefine how Twitch interacts with music and its chat on stream. Maybe the next future Flavours Sound Festival can integrate it into our very own stream. We'll have to see. Once again, thank you very much, Robert, for joining us. That brings us to our final guest of the day, and that is Simon Weins. Simon Weins is behind the creation of Infra. Now, this project showcases an interactive music system that processes incoming sound in real time using Max MSP. Let's have a look. And welcome back. We are now joined by Simon Weins, the mastermind that brought us Infra. Is there anything else you'd like to say about your patch?
Hey everyone. I think, especially after seeing everyone else's piece, I'm slightly embarrassed that I just quickly chucked this out. It was a bit last minute, so I think it would probably have been useful to explain one or two things about it. So in this instance, I was basically just using kind of background noise as a trigger for the whole system. And so basically you have 8 voices running in parallel, and it analyzes the onset detection of those sounds and then basically decides what's being turned on and off. And there are like different processes going on. I think the video itself didn't explain a whole lot of that, and I guess maybe there are like a few questions of how the thing is internally rooted. And there are also still quite a few open bits. Like right now, it actually has taken the form where there's a preset system where you can have like sub presets for each module and also the whole routing system as a whole. So right now, this in the video that I showed you, there was only one possible routing of many. I was just fiddling a bit around with it. I guess like one question for me is still if this thing is a player or an instrument, because on the one hand, like I really like to be in there and fiddle around with it, but on the other hand, like the whole impetus of doing it was that it had a mind of its own in a way. And so I'm always kind of struggling a bit with how much control I actually want to have over that thing, or like what the relationship between the player and that thing is, and that's still something that I'm trying to figure out a bit, I guess, because I don't actually play an instrument, so I don't really have like a musical background, and I can give it some trigger, but I find it much more fulfilling being actually in that thing and becoming like one with the thing itself. So yeah, that's a bit of an open question, I think.
Well, once again, let's open this up to our panelists. Have you got any opening comments? We'll start this again with Edwin.
Yeah, hi Simon. Well, actually, to answer your question, because that was the first thing I wanted to say to you. I think the answer for me is actually yes, because what I like about the project is the actual experimentational aspect of it. Like, actually, especially for me as a musician, so, playing instrument, knowing music, etc. I think this kind of project is just really nice to kind of let go a little bit and just, as you said, like he has his own brain, so he just like you just trigger a little bit, but then he just like giving you some stuff that you couldn't really think yourself, and just it's really just really nice for the creativity. For me, actually, personally, I really think that's that is definitely something super useful for the creativity. The other remark I wanted to make on this before I ask some question is I need to give you a +1 as well for your patch, your Max MSP patch. I thought super well organized. Like everything is super clear, and I just had a feeling like if I had to use it directly, I would know where to start and how to use it. So really nice thing. I'm just gonna come back in a second because someone knocked the door. Maybe Owen just can carry on.
At which point, yes, let's hand over to Owen.
Hi Simon, how you doing?
Hey Owen.
I'm in the fortunate position of already knowing a little bit about this piece because we met a few weeks ago. I've got a couple of different answers to the question of manual control versus automation, but I actually wanted to start with a question about the role that you talk in your text about the viable system model from Stafford Beer, and the role that cybernetics as a set of ideas has played in this. How is it actually working in the patch at the moment? Is it quite a literal application of this model from Stafford Beer, or is it sort of more figurative?
It started quite literal, and then I guess the crazier the sounds became, it became maybe a bit more metaphorical. Like at one point it was really so that every subpage was fully controlling itself, but it would kind of lead the DSP to be stuck in quite extreme positions because the descriptors didn't really map very well to some of the parameters. So I think it was just eating up quite a lot of CPU just by trying to keep up at a pace that wasn't really necessary. So I think there's like one aspect that's kind of hidden from there, but each DSP patch has an FFT filter that basically adapts each module to the overall situation. So there's this one knob, I don't know if you saw it in the video, but in the left corner of each DSP module, there's this adaptation knob, and it basically decides how well the DSP module is kind of situated in the frequency spectrum. So the idea was that, like, if you have environmental sounds, each bird, for example, takes like a certain position in the frequency spectrum. And the idea was that each module would kind of adapt to the situation as well. And that was kind of like one idea that was taken very directly from the whole viable system model, that you have that each module is kind of a viable system in itself. I think it would kind of like just explode this talk a bit if we would talk about the viable system model, but it's basically a complex model for an organizational model for organizing like very complex systems and creating self-adaptation in the system. So it is very much modeled on the viable system, but for example, there's a system for which is supposed to predict future developments, and I'm still struggling with that. Like I don't know what could be there in a way, and I've tried to work on a classification model with the FluCoMA stuff, and I have like one thing that I've implemented now where it basically extracts a scale from sound that it has heard. So there are some ideas I have there, but this is like very metaphorical, because in real life I don't even know if you can predict the future anyway. But Stafford Beer had this idea of like the system for which would predict something of the future, and I'm still a bit unclear what that could be. But right now it's like a preset system that would communicate with, for example, a classification system, or something that would basically analyze what's going on outside the system.
Yeah, it's a real difficulty with some of these cybernetic things applied to music, where there's targets or goals involved in the original model. Then all of a sudden you realise that that's not a very easy concept to map onto to music, particularly improvised music. There's a really interesting person called, it's a strange name, Randall Glanville, who was a cybernetician. He was a musician first, and then he became a cybernetician. So definitely worth checking out on two fronts, partly because he made music which I think is actually of a similar sound world to what you've got there, but he was also quite interested in non-goal orientated cybernetic systems, and he was quite critical of some sort of fixation of other cybernetic stuff on the idea that they needed targets to self-regulate and what have you. Now, when it comes back to the control thing, there's a couple of approaches you can try. One we could call the Agostino Di Scipio model, where rather than giving yourself direct control over anything, you just control systemic variables. So perhaps the relative gains between modules or something like that. So you're part of the control loop, but you're not directly affecting stuff. And the other we could call the John Bowers model, where you make it so that your modules can be either autonomous, can be both autonomous and manually controlled, just by having touch detection or something. So you can always override where some delegated process is going and intervene somehow in the process. But when you leave it alone for a bit, it will go back to steering itself. So it can be a nice compromise there. And I think I'll hand it over to Edwin at this point, otherwise I'll just keep going up.
Yeah, sorry about this. Maybe I will actually repeat some stuff because I've been missing a little bit. But I still wanted to come back to the video, and because as you said in the introduction, there was some stuff that I was not too sure to understand, and maybe I wanted a bit more explanation. But so for example, in terms of like the input to your system, because I could see you were talking about the audio, but there was also like a sort of MIDI controller that you had, I think. So. This one was it like controlling parameters of effects, or just like some variable inside the system that we don't really know about? And I was not sure what you were doing with this.
Well, so the only thing that I was controlling was basically the adaptation of each module to the overall situation. And the thing is, if you crank up the adaptation of one module, another module will be affected by that adaptation as well, because there's like more space, for example, for that module. So I was basically regulating the adaptation of the different modules in that situation. And thereby you can basically say who's in the foreground, who's in the background, although I don't particularly like that metaphor, but it's basically kind of directing how present something is. And that was the thing that I was controlling.
Cool, okay, I got you. And just the acoustics node then. So you were saying that in this particular patch that you're having, so the audio is actually controlling, like it's just a gate, then so you just do the transients, you're not using the frequency content of the signal or anything like this.
I'm not sure I've understood it completely, but basically, so what's happening is background noise is going in, it's getting muffled up, processed, and rerouted throughout the system. So there's quite a bit of feedback going on. So one module is probably running through 4 other modules and then maybe running back into itself. So there's quite a lot of complicated processing going on that's very difficult to untangle once you have the sound, because like each module has also pitch shifting going on in one way or another. So you get all these crazy and wonderful little artifacts that happen in that process, and that's basically what I was playing with. I think it's still a bit of a question if that input sound is actually relevant, or if it could just be anything really, and then like what kind of information I want to get from there that is not audio rate. So if there's actually something to be analyzed that I could use in a musical context, and that's still, I don't know, I think a question that I need to figure out myself.
Yeah, I think that ends up being really key, is working out how you're going to respond computationally to incoming stuff, because I don't know how much you've looked at any of the Agostino, Discipio, Audible ecosystem things, but processing wise, they're not all that complicated. It's filters and sample playback. Where a lot of the work is really tailoring how the control signals are latching in on a particular thing. So he's got this background noise study piece where most of the control signals are actually generated off threshold crossings, just a fairly simple envelope follower, and he's doing that because he knows you've got noisy stuff coming in. It's going to, as it builds up, you're going to get more and more frequent threshold crossings. So it's very cheap, and it's kind of this really lo-fi noise detector that then sort of pushes the rest of the system. Whereas in feedback study, obviously he's dealing more with sustained tones, and that's much more about tuning bandpass filters, basically using kind of homeostat thing to try and find out where the happy point of the system is. So again, they're very cheap forms of analysis, and that's part of what gives it the musical interest, because they're never going to be right. Particularly once the thing starts feeding back on itself, it's going to break its own rules almost immediately. So I think, you don't need an analysis process for these things that's perfect. You can make that part of the artistic focus, is enjoying the different ways in which they might be wrong, and taking advantage of that and slowing them right down as well. I could see your CPU was pegging out quite a lot there. So the easiest way of getting around that is just to do less of it, and enjoy the fact that then the system will slip and slide a little bit more.
Well, once again, we have another stunning piece of work. Thank you very much, Simon. Unfortunately, that is all we have for today's audio programming stream. A huge shout out to all of our participants today, and a massive thanks to our panelists who have joined us, given a tremendous amount of feedback and advice. All of our students will no doubt find this incredibly useful, so a huge thank you to you both.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom. It was really interesting.